Hello Book Chief, Sean here. Welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to bring you a video that I originally planned to film and upload about 2 or 3 weeks back, and to be honest, if I don't do it soon it's going to be pointless because it is my anticipated releases of 2018, and given that I'm going to speak to you about 16 books and about half of them are already out, they're not so much my anticipated releases anymore as ones that you can go and lay your hands on if you do so wish. Although, you know, I would argue that there are some advantages to being late to the party on videos like this. You know, those awful organised people who were there in the end of December, mid-December, with their big long list of books anticipated for 2018. You know, they were teasing you and whetting your appetite, knowing that it was going to be weeks, in some cases months, before you could go out and buy any of these books. Well, with me being late, if you fancy the sound of, if you like the sound of some of the earlier books that I'm going to talk about, you can go out tomorrow, at least if you live in the UK, and you can go and part with some of your hard-earned cash and get your hands on them. So I think that's an advantage, or at least that's my excuse, and I'm kind of sticking to it. So I'm going to do 3 videos covering January to April, the first part of the year, with the releases I'm most excited about. The first one is going to be sort of general fiction. The second one I'm going to do a sci-fi and fantasy one specifically, and then the third one will be non-fiction. Not sure when I'll get to the other 2 videos, but the fiction one is the, you know, this is the chunkiest one. I've got 16 books that I want to talk about. So that's it. Let's get into the books. The first one is 3 Things About Elsie. I've got them listed down here on my tablet if you see me looking down. This is by Joanna. I think everybody knows about this book more or less. I've seen it on a load of lists. I really enjoyed her last book, The Drawer with Goats and Sheep, and I'm looking forward to this one. The synopsis is kind of light, actually. It doesn't really give much away. What I can tell you is that it's about an elderly woman who, at the beginning of the book, falls over in some kind of residential care home, and as she's waiting for assistance, she starts to reminisce back over her life and how she became friends with Elsie of the book's title. It doesn't really give much more away than that, and I have placed a hold for this book on my library's ebook platform. The earliest I can expect to read it is mid-April, so that gives you some idea of how popular Joanna is at the moment. Next book is a book that I've already picked up. It was released on the 25th of January, and it is a debut novel by a London-based author called Imogen Hermes Gower. It's called The Mermaid Mrs Hancock. Now, this is a mix of historical fiction and magical realism. It follows a merchant in the 1780s in Britain, and through some convoluted means, he comes into possession of what he claims is a real mermaid. And it is about how the fame and wealth that comes from that propel him into kind of high society, and along the way he meets this high-class courtesan who kind of helps him navigate the kind of politics of high society. Simon over at Savage Reads has given this a good review. I saw his review on Goodreads, which is basically everybody go out and read this, and he gave that 5 stars, so I plan to do just that in March. Now, the next book is kind of, I'm a bit apprehensive about including on this list. It's called Kintu. It was out on the 25th of January, and it's a debut novel, and it's by, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, so apologies, Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi. She's a Ugandan, an author of Ugandan descent who lives in the UK. And the reason this attracted my attention is it's compared to Homegoing by Yassi. Now, Homegoing was, if not my favourite book of last year, certainly in the top 3. I just thought it was a stunning, audacious debut novel. And I'm worried that this is just lazy advertising, because there are some comparisons between the 2 stories. Kintu is much like Homegoing, a multi-generational African family saga that follows this family from the 1770s. It's based in Uganda and kind of mixes in elements of local folklore and legends. So there are a lot of parallels with Homegoing, but that is quite a benchmark to set a debut novel, and I'm just nervous that it may be way off the mark in terms of matching up to those, but I do hope to pick this up later in the year. So that's Kintu, and it's released on the 25th of January. And the next book that I had on my list is a historical fiction book that I originally saw on one of Dave over in Wild Reads, one of his anticipated releases videos. It's called The White Chrysanthemum. It was out on the 30th of January, and it's by an American author of Korean descent called Lynn Bracht. And this is set in World War II. It follows 2 Korean sisters who are separated by World War II, separated by Japanese soldiers. One of them is captured. And then there is a storyline in that follows one of the sisters in the modern day, I believe, searching for her sister. I really enjoy World War II history generally, but the Korean experience is not something I'm familiar with, so as well as being a great story, I'm hoping this gives me some sense of how World War II was experienced in Korea. Now the next one on the list is probably the most kind of horrific and macabre kind of story that I've got on here. It's called Frankenstein in Baghdad, and it's by an Iraqi author called Ahmed Saadawi. This is a work in translation. It won the International Prize for Arabic Fiction in 2014, and it is basically a story set in the immediate aftermath of the 2003 invasion of Iraq and fall of Baghdad. It follows a kind of scavenger who sort of looks around the kind of bomb craters of Baghdad, and he collects body parts, and he's doing some kind of surreal, kind of dark, twisted political protest by sewing these various body parts together. But then one day the body that he's created out of these body parts disappears, and people start dying around the city in these horrific manners. And it just sounds like a really dark, twisted, surreal take on the Frankenstein story, set against an unusual backdrop. So that's Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Saadawi. It was out on the 1st of February in the UK. The next one is called Self-Portrait with Boy by an American author called Rachel Lyon. This is a debut novel. And this is the story of a young, struggling artist who really wants to make an impact in the sort of artistic world. Is struggling to do so, and then one day when she is in an old neighbourhood where her parents live, she is taking some photographs and accidentally captures a young neighbourhood boy falling to his death, and the story picks up from there and is about the conflict about whether she should use that picture to, you know, promote her career, I guess, and the impact that that may have on her relations with her family, who I believe knew this boy or knew this boy's family. So that's Self-Portrait with Boy by Rachel Lyon, out on the 6th of February. The next one is a book that I originally saw tweeted about on Sarah Perry's Twitter feed. So that's the author of The Essex Serpent. And in fact, Sarah Perry has blurbed the cover of this book. It's a book that I've picked up just this weekend, and it was out on the 8th of February. It's an historical fiction called The Sealwoman's Gift by Sally Magnusson, who's a Scottish writer. And it is based around a true historical event, based in the 1600s, around a raiding party of Barbary pirates who raided Iceland and took some slaves, and it follows the story of one of those slaves called Asta, who is the pastor's wife as she is transported from Iceland to Algiers, and how she struggles to come to terms with her new life in this alien culture, and how she has to kind of rely on the Icelandic sagas and stories of her childhood to maintain that, a sense of identity. So that's The Sealwoman's Gift by Sally Magnusson. Now the next book is, again, another hyped book, which is either going to be absolutely brilliant or a complete gimmick. It is called The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. It was out on the 8th of February. I believe it's a debut novel, and it's been kind of promoted as a mixture of an Agatha Christie high society kind of murder mystery meets Groundhog Day and Inception. So you've got, in the story is, there is a party. At the end of this party, the hostess, Evelyn Hardcastle, is murdered. So that's the kind of Agatha Christie bit. And then you've got the other twist on that then is that one of the party guests, not only does he start waking up and reliving the day of the party over and over, but each day that he wakes up, he's in the body of a different party guest. And the only way to break the cycle is to solve the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle, or prevent the murder. So, as I say, that is either going to be absolutely brilliant, a really interesting twist on the traditional murder mystery, or it's going to be a complete gimmicky pile of shite. So we'll see how that turns out. Anyway, I'm quite keen to pick that up. I've seen it on audiobook, so I'll make it that an audiobook. The next one is one that I saw on Britta Bohler's channel, which sounded quite interesting in a kind of anticipated releases or coming releases video. I'll link that video down below. It's called Asymmetry. It's by an American author called Lisa Halliday. I think it's another debut novel as well. And it has these parallel stories, one about a young publisher who starts an affair with a famous and much older novelist. And the second storyline is about an Iraqi Kurd who has been detained at Heathrow Airport, and is struggling to get back to see his brother in Iraqi Kurdistan, and somehow these two stories are linked, and it's slowly kind of teased out how these stories are actually linked together. And I will always really enjoy that kind of setup where you have two or more storylines that seem unconnected but then are connected cleverly throughout the novel. So that's what I'm hoping this one will be. That's Asymmetry by Lisa Halliday. That's out on the 1st of March. Another historical novel next, The Western Wind by Samantha Harvey. This is also out on the 1st of March. And this one just had a really interesting setting with an element of mystery is what attracted me to it. So it's about, it's set in a 15th century English village, a rural village, and it's narrated by the local priest. And the book opens with a local wealthy landowner being found dead in the river, and then the book tells the story going backwards over the previous 4 days. So that's just really kind of intrigued me from a setting perspective, but also the fact that it's a mystery told going back in time. Now the next one has got a lot of pressure on its shoulders. It's been hyped up as this year's Handmaid's Tale, a kind of tag that got attached to The Power by Naomi Alderman as well. I have seen this book reviewed or in a wrap-up and given sort of high praise on Russell's channel on Ink and Paper blog, and it is called Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas. So this is set in a near future America, a dystopian America, where Roe versus Wade has been overturned, the abortions are illegal, and also IVF and treatments like that are illegal, and it follows the lives of 5 women in a small Oregon town against this backdrop. Now, Handmaid's Tale is not a book that I've read before. It is a book that I'm planning on picking up in March, so what I'll probably do is read that and then follow on with Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas, maybe in April. The next book I've already read, it's The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. It's out in physical copy in this country on the 8th of March, but it came out in ebook format in January, and I've already read it, so I'm not going to say too much about it here. The synopsis is that it is about 4 siblings who in 1969 in New York go and see a fortune teller who tells all of them individually the day that they're going to die, and it then follows the lives of those 4 siblings and about how that kind of knowledge impacts the way that they lead their lives. So that's The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin, out in physical copy on the 8th of March, although you can pick it up on ebook in the UK now. The next one, really the only sort of more purist kind of suspense book on here. It's called Tangerine by Christine Mangan. It's out on the 27th of March, and it follows the protagonist Alice. It's set in Tangiers, where she is living with her husband and struggling to kind of get used to both the place and also the social scene there. She starts to come out of her shell when an old friend of hers, who she's not seen in a year, turns up in Tangiers and starts to kind of coax her out of her shell and into parties and so on. But then things take a dark turn when her husband disappears, and it's sort of been compared to Patricia Highsmith. So this is a kind of more of an out-and-out suspense book, probably the only one on the list that I've got. The next one is another historical fiction. It's called I Was Anastasia by Ariel Lawhon, and this is out on the 27th of March. This follows, it's a fictionalised version of the life of Anna Anderson, who is a woman who turned up in 1920s Berlin claiming to be Anastasia Romanov, the youngest daughter of Tsar Nicholas II. And I've read a fair bit of Russian history last year, so I do have a kind of interest in the Romanovs. And I was aware of this story of Anna Anderson before as well, but had not read too much about it, so I'm hoping this will be a kind of window into that. The next book is out on the 5th of April. It's by Anbara Salam, who is a half Palestinian, half Scottish author. It's called Things Bright and Beautiful. It's based in part on our own experiences living and working on a small South Pacific island. The story itself, though, is set in 1954 and follows the wife of a missionary who goes out to a small South Pacific island and has to deal with not only the climate and the geography, but also a kind of surly and mistrustful local population. The reason that I thought this one sounded interesting was because it was kind of giving me shades of the Poisonwood Bible. So that's a book that I read last year by Barbara Kingsolver and really enjoyed. That was set in the Belgian Congo, though, but it was a similar kind of story about, a family going out to a kind of remote location, and a missionary family at that. So yeah, that's The Things Bright and Beautiful, out on the 5th of April. And the final one on the list kind of cuts across my two hobbies. I mentioned in previous videos that I enjoy bird watching, and it is called The Life List of Adrian Mandrick. It's out on the 17th of April, and it is by an American author and playwright called Chris White. So this follows the story of an ornithologist who is also a avid bird watcher, and it's kind of about how his life is disintegrating and how he copes with that by not only getting addicted to painkillers but also trying to track down one of the rarest birds in the world. He's a kind of obsessive birder, one of these that kind of collects a life list together of birds that they've seen, and he goes after one of the rarest birds in sort of Panhandle, Florida, amongst the swamps and the mosquitoes, and it's about how he's using that to escape from his family life. And I just thought it sounded like a really interesting kind of mix of ideas. So that's The Life List of Adrian Mandrick by Chris White, and that's the final book on my list. As I say, I'm going to get to a couple of other videos on sci-fi and fantasy, and then one on non-fiction as well, so look out for those coming out. Let me know if you've heard of any of these books. If you've read any of them, let me know what your feelings are without giving away any spoilers, and let me know what some of your anticipated releases are for the early part of 2018 as well. Other than that, I will see you in the next video. Bye now.